Hi everybody, it's Ed again. In my previous video entitled The Holy Closet, I wanted to touch on the subject of atheism and agnosticism, but the 10-minute limit and my verbal diarrhea got in the way, so I decided to make a new video devoted to the concepts of atheism and agnosticism. In my previous video I mentioned that I personally encountered lots of people who claim to be agnostics, but whom I believe to be atheists. Part of the reasons why I believe atheists don't define themselves as such is all the myths and misconceptions that come along with the word atheist. On the other hand, I think that there's misinformation of what it means to be an atheist, or a misinterpretation of what it is based on a narrow definition of the word. I would like to address 2 points in this video. First, the definition of atheism, and second, the fact that atheism and agnosticism are not necessarily mutually exclusive concepts. If you go to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, you'll find 2 definitions for atheism. The first one is the disbelief in the existence of God, and the second definition is that atheism is the doctrine that there is no deity. Many dictionaries have only the latter definition, expressed in words such as that atheism is the belief that there is no God, or that it is the belief that God doesn't exist. Other dictionaries, such as the Oxford Dictionary, have a more inclusive definition, and it defines atheism as the denial or disbelief in the existence of God. Most modern atheists adhere to a more inclusive definition of atheism. For example, Richard Dawkins states that the mere rejection of a personal God who's interventional and concerned with human affairs would make you an atheist right away. But if you don't like philosophical definitions made by a scientist, then we can turn to philosophers. For example, British philosopher Anthony Flew said that if you just look at the word atheist etymologically, it means not a theist, in the same way that asymmetrical means not symmetrical, or atypical means not typical. Another example is American philosopher Michael Martin, that, and I'm going to read a quote, an atheist would simply be someone without a belief in God, not necessarily someone who believes that God does not exist. So being an atheist does not mean that we know God doesn't exist, at least not necessarily. Some atheists believe in the non-existence of God, and others don't believe in the existence of God. There is a subtle but very important difference. The former statement implies faith, whereas the latter means exactly the opposite, lack of faith. As with most things in life, atheism comes in many shades of grey. Now let me move on to my second point about agnosticism. According to the standard definition of agnosticism, if you were to declare that with the current knowledge it is impossible to know whether God exists, you would be an agnostic. If you just go to the etymology of the word, agnostic comes from the Greek agnostos, that means literally unknown or unknowable. So there's no controversy here. However, if on top of that agnostic stance you cease to believe on the grounds that you cannot know, then you'd be an atheist as well, and then you'd be an agnostic atheist. I guess that some people could also be an agnostic theist. If you were to say, for example, I don't know for sure whether God exists, but I still have faith in him, her, it. I don't personally know anybody with this position, but technically they could be out there. The bottom line is that there are two questions, and totally different questions. The first question is there a God? If you were asked that question, is there a God, you could answer three different answers, right? You could say yes, no, or I don't know. If you were to say I don't know, you'd be an agnostic. Now, when faced to the question, do you believe there is a God? In my personal opinion, there are only two possible answers, yes or no. So if you say yes, you're a theist, and if you say no, you're a non-theist, an atheist. But let's suppose for a second that there is a third possible answer to the question, do you believe there is a God? So let's say that you could say, I don't know if I believe. You still wouldn't be a theist. And if you're not a theist, you're an atheist. This is not me trying to force people to come to the atheist side. It's me just trying to explain what it means to be an atheist, and not what it means to me personally. It's what it means to many atheists, including respectable scholars in the subject. Those are my two main points that I wanted to make in this video. However, let me finish by telling you where I personally stand. I define myself as an agnostic atheist. That is, I don't know for sure whether God exists, but I don't believe in God. Based on the available evidence, I think it's highly improbable that God exists. I arrived to this conclusion analyzing the facts, looking at the evidence, and through inductive reasoning. So far, there is nothing out there that would lead me to believe that God exists, and therefore I don't believe. However, I'm a scientist, and before you jump to conclusions, let me digress for a second to explain one thing. My bringing up science here doesn't mean that I believe that science disproves God. In fact, God is not pertinent to science. Science deals with trying to explain the natural world, and the concept of God is supernatural. But as I said, I am a scientist, and science teaches us that we need to be prepared to change our paradigm. For example, when I was growing up, if somebody asked me how many planets there are in the solar system, I would have answered 9. But we all know that in 2006, I believe, Pluto was stripped of its planet status, and now we know it's a dwarf planet together with Haumea and Makemake in the Kuiper Belt. So if today somebody asks me how many planets there are in the solar system, I would say 8 planets, and 5 dwarf planets have been discovered so far. The point is that we knew before that we had 9 planets, and today we know we have 8. So the attitude is that provided new evidence, one should be prepared to change our paradigm. So if someday somebody comes up with credible evidence that God exists, I would have to change my view. It would have to be pretty solid and convincing evidence, but I would have to change my view. Now, my hypothetical acceptance of God's existence doesn't have anything to do with my decision to follow him, her, it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was useful. Until my next video, and cheers!